The security cameras caught everything. A thin girl in torn clothing slipping through the gates of the most expensive estate in Lagos at exactly 3 a.m. 5 nights in a row. The billionaire watched the footage in his study, jaw clenched, ready to call the police. But then he saw something that made his finger freeze over the phone. The girl wasn't stealing. She was sitting under his daughter's window, reading from textbooks by flashlight, whispering answers to questions he didn't know his daughter was asking. When he zoomed in closer, he saw tears streaming down both their faces. His daughter, the one failing every subject despite the best tutors money could buy, was finally smiling while learning. What this homeless girl knew and what she was about to reveal would force him to question everything he believed about power, worth, and what truly makes someone rich. If you enjoy thrilling African stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and tell us where you are watching from. Your support means the world to us. His name was Chief Ademola Bakare, but everyone in Nigeria called him the Fortress. He didn't just own buildings, he owned skylines, 17 towers across Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. His signature was on every major construction contract worth over $50 million. His cars cost more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. His home in Banana Island had 23 rooms, and he could only remember sleeping in 7 of them. Forbes listed him at number 4 in West Africa. Presidents took his calls. Governors waited in his lobby. His wife wore jewelry that required its own security detail. But none of that mattered anymore, because for 3 years he had watched his only child disappear into herself. Amara, his brilliant daughter, the one who used to recite poems at age 4, now sat silent at dinner. Her school reports came back with failing grades in red ink. The private tutors lasted a week each before quitting. The psychologists called it selective silence. The neurologists found nothing wrong. His wife cried herself to sleep. And Chief Bakare, the man who could build anything, couldn't reach his own daughter. Money bought him everything except the sound of her voice. Every night he stood outside her door, listening to silence, wondering where he lost her. Then came the morning his head of security knocked on his office door with a face full of confusion. Someone had been breaching the compound, not once, not twice, 5 times in 2 weeks. The chief's blood went cold. He thought of kidnappers, criminals, people who knew how much a Bakare was worth. He demanded to see the footage immediately. His security team set up the monitors, and he watched with growing rage as a figure appeared on screen, slipping through a gap in the fence near the gardener's shed at dawn. Small frame, quick movements, purposeful. His fist hit the desk. How dare someone violate his fortress? But then the figure moved into clearer view under the security lights. A girl, teenage, skinny, clothes that looked like they'd been worn for months. She wasn't heading toward the house. She was walking to the garden, to the stone bench under Amara's window, and she was carrying books, heavy textbooks in a plastic bag. The chief leaned forward. What was this? The girl sat down, opened a mathematics book, and started writing on loose papers. Then something happened that made his heart stop. His daughter's window opened. Amara's face appeared, and she was smiling. The chief had not seen his daughter smile in 3 years.
He watched the rest in complete silence. The homeless girl would work through problems, showing her solutions up toward the window. Amara would nod, then try the problems herself, holding up her notebook. When she got stuck, the girl would break it down differently. Patient, creative, drawing diagrams in the dirt with a stick when words weren't enough. This went on for an hour. At one point, Amara laughed, actually laughed out loud. The sound didn't reach the cameras, but the chief saw it. His daughter, His silent, unreachable daughter was laughing at a math joke. When the session ended, the girl packed her things carefully. Amara waved, and the girl waved back before slipping out the same way she came. The chief sat back in his chair. His security team waited for orders. Arrest her? Ban her? Increase patrols? But he couldn't speak, because for the first time in years, his daughter had connected with another human being, and it was with a girl who had nothing. He told his security to do nothing, just watch, document everything. He needed to understand what was happening before he made any move, but the question burned in his mind. Who was this girl, and how did she reach his daughter when everyone else failed? Over the next 2 weeks, the chief became obsessed. He watched every footage. The girl came 4 times a week, always before dawn, always with books, mathematics, English, science, history. She knew all of it. More than that, she knew how to make Amara understand it. Where the expensive tutors got frustrated, this girl found new angles. Where the psychologists pushed too hard, she gave space, and slowly, something remarkable started happening. Amara began leaving her room during the day. She came down for breakfast. She answered her mother's questions with actual words, not just nods. Her latest school quiz came back with 78%, the first passing grade in 2 years. The chief's wife was crying again, but this time from joy. She didn't know why their daughter was changing. She thought it was a miracle. She thought maybe the prayers finally worked. But the chief knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was a homeless girl with textbooks and patience. He had his driver follow her one morning. The report came back and made his chest tight. The girl lived in a makeshift shelter under the Yiko Bridge. She had no parents, no family. She survived by helping market women carry goods for small change. At night, she studied under streetlights. The books she carried weren't even hers. She borrowed them from a sympathetic teacher at a nearby school who let her sit in the back of classes she wasn't enrolled in. Everything she knew, she taught herself. Everything she had, she used to help his daughter. And she asked for nothing in return. The chief found himself at a crossroads he never expected. His first instinct was control. Bring the girl in, formalize this, turn it into something proper with contracts and payments and structure. That's how he operated. That's how you managed assets. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Amara's face lit up during those secret sessions. Maybe it was the purity of what was happening. A transaction of knowledge and kindness with no negotiation, no terms, no leverage. His world didn't work like that. Everything had a price. Everyone wanted something. Except this girl. She just wanted to teach. She just wanted to help. It didn't make sense to him, and things that didn't make sense made him uncomfortable. He called a family meeting, told his wife everything, showed her the footage. His wife sat in stunned silence watching this stranger love their daughter from the shadows. When the video ended, she looked at her husband with tears streaming down her face and asked the question he'd been avoiding. What kind of world do we live in where a homeless child has more to give our daughter than all our wealth combined? The chief had no answer. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stood in his study, looking out over Lagos, over the city he'd helped build, over the lights of wealth and poverty existing side by side, and for the first time in his adult life, he felt small.
He made a decision that his advisors would call reckless, his lawyers would call it unnecessary, his business partners would call it soft. He didn't care. The next morning, he was waiting in the garden when the girl arrived. She froze when she saw him. Fear flooded her face. She dropped her books and ran. But the chief called out, not with authority, but with something that surprised even himself. Gentleness. Please, don't go. I'm not angry. I just want to talk. The girl stopped at the fence, poised to flee, every muscle ready. He could see her calculating, run now or risk whatever punishment was coming. He sat down on the stone bench, made himself non-threatening. I've been watching you teach my daughter.
She started to apologize, words tumbling out about how she didn't mean harm, how she just wanted to help, how she'd leave and never come back. He raised his hand. "You misunderstand. I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to thank you." The girl's face shifted from fear to confusion. "Thank me?" "For 3 years," he explained, "my daughter has been lost. The best doctors couldn't help her. The best teachers couldn't reach her. I spent millions trying to bring her back. And then you showed up with borrowed books and patience, and you did what none of them could do. You gave me my daughter back." "Why?" The girl stood silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her words carried a weight that money couldn't buy. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible, to have people look through you like you don't exist. Nobody should feel that way, especially not someone who just needs to be seen differently." The chief felt something crack open in his chest. This girl, this child with nothing, understood something he'd forgotten. He'd been trying to fix his daughter with resources, with experts, with solutions that cost money. But Amara didn't need expensive. She needed genuine. She didn't need credentials. She needed connection. And this homeless girl offered the one thing his wealth couldn't purchase: pure, uncomplicated human kindness. He asked her name. She hesitated, then answered, "Zainab." He asked if she'd be willing to meet Amara properly, not through a window, not in secret, as a real teacher, as a friend. Zainab looked at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "You want me to come inside? You want me to meet her for real?" He nodded. "But there's a condition." She tensed. "Here it comes," her face said. "The catch, the price, the thing he wants in return." But what he said next wasn't what she expected. "The condition is that you let me help you the way you've helped my daughter. Let me give you what you've been giving her. A chance." Zainab's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak but couldn't, so she just nodded. And for the first time since this all began, the chief smiled. Not the smile he used in boardrooms, not the smile for cameras, a real smile. The kind that reaches the eyes, the kind that only comes when something true happens.
What happened next became the talk of Banana Island for months. The chief didn't just hire Zainab as a tutor. He enrolled her in the same international school as Amara. Full scholarship, room and board in the staff quarters, not as charity, as payment for services rendered. But his business partners saw it differently. They called emergency meetings. "Chief, you can't just bring a street girl into your home. Think of the optics. Think of the security risks. Think of what people will say." His wife's society friends were even more direct. "Darling, there are proper ways to do charity. Donate to an orphanage, sponsor a program. But this, having her live on the property, teaching your daughter, it's too close, too familiar. You're blurring lines that shouldn't be blurred." The chief listened to all of it. Then he said something that silenced the room. "My daughter speaks now. She laughs, she learns, she lives. Zainab did that. Not your proper channels, not your appropriate distance. If you have a problem with how I choose to thank the person who saved my child, you can leave my house." No one left. But the whispers continued. At school it was worse. The other students looked at Zainab like a curiosity. The scholarship girl from the bridge, the homeless one who got lucky. They weren't cruel exactly, just careful, distant, like poverty might be contagious. But Amara didn't care. For the first time in years, she had a real friend. Someone who saw her, not her father's money. Someone who knew what it meant to struggle, even if the struggles were different. The transformation in Amara accelerated. Within 3 months, she was top of her class in mathematics. Her English essays won school competitions. She joined the debate team. Her teachers couldn't believe it was the same girl. But it wasn't just academics. Amara started talking at home, really talking, about her day, her thoughts, her dreams. She told her parents what happened 3 years ago, the thing that made her go silent. A teacher had humiliated her in front of the whole class, called her stupid when she struggled with a concept, said she only passed because of her father's donations. Something broke inside her that day. She decided if trying meant being called a rich girl who bought her grades, she'd rather not try at all, rather be silent than be fake. The chief listened to his daughter's confession with a breaking heart. All this time, she wasn't broken. She was protecting herself, and he'd been throwing money at the problem, which only made it worse, proved the teacher right in Amara's mind. But Zainab was different. Zainab had nothing to gain from her success, no bonus tied to her grades, no reputation to maintain, just pure investment in seeing another person grow. That's what made it real. That's what made it matter. The chief realized then that he'd built an empire but forgotten what foundation truly meant. Not concrete and steel, connection and trust.
6 months into this new reality, something unexpected happened. Zainab's story got out. A journalist somehow heard about the homeless girl living in Banana Island teaching a billionaire's daughter. The article went viral. From bridge to mansion, the tutor who changed everything. Suddenly, everyone wanted to interview Zainab. News stations, podcasts, magazines. The chief's security team went on high alert. But Zainab handled it with a grace that shocked everyone. She gave one interview, just one, and in it she said something that the chief would never forget. The reporter asked her what it felt like to go from having nothing to living in luxury. Zainab looked directly into the camera and said this: "I didn't go from nothing to everything. I've always had something. Knowledge, kindness, hope. Those things weren't given to me by Chief Bakare. I brought them with me. What he gave me was opportunity, a platform, a chance to use what I already had. That's the real gift. Not the school or the room or the comfort, but being seen, being valued, being told that where you come from doesn't limit where you can go." The interview ended with the reporter asking what she wanted to do with her life. Zainab smiled. "I want to teach. I want to find other girls like me and show them that their circumstances don't define their worth. I want to build schools in places where schools don't exist, and I want to prove that the best education doesn't come from the most expensive buildings. It comes from teachers who actually care." The chief watched that interview 3 times. Each time, he felt something shift inside him. This girl, this teenager who'd been sleeping under a bridge 6 months ago, had more clarity about purpose than he'd ever had. He'd spent his whole life building things, towers, wealth, legacy. But for what? To be called the fortress? To be feared? To die the richest man in the cemetery? Zainab knew something he was just learning, that real wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give away. It's the lives you touch, the doors you open, the hope you restore. He called an emergency board meeting for his company. His executives gathered, expecting the usual quarterly review. Instead, the chief announced a new division, Bakare Foundation for Educational Access. Initial funding of $50 million. Mission to identify and support brilliant students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Full scholarships, mentorship programs, teacher training. And leading the advisory board, once she turned 18 and graduated, would be Zainab herself. The room went silent. Then one brave executive spoke up. "Chief, with respect, $50 million is a significant commitment for an unproven program." The chief looked at him with an expression that could cut glass. 3 years ago, I would have paid $50 million just to hear my daughter laugh again. This girl gave me that for free. Now I'm investing in making sure other children get the same chance she gave Amara. The chance to be seen, to be taught, to be valued. If you think that's unproven, you don't understand what we're building here. The foundation launched 6 months later. The event was held not in a luxury hotel, but in the open space under the Echo Bridge, the same place Zainab used to sleep. The chief wanted it there deliberately, as a reminder, as a statement. Hundreds of people came, street children, market women, teachers from public schools, government officials who couldn't believe a billionaire was hosting an event in what they considered a slum. The chief stood at the makeshift podium with Zainab beside him. Amara stood on his other side. 3 lives connected by an unlikely story. He spoke without notes, just from the heart. For years, I believed that success meant building the tallest towers, having the most money, the biggest reputation. I was wrong. Real success is measured in transformed lives. in potential unlocked, in children who were told they matter. This foundation isn't charity, it's investment. We're investing in the Zainabs of this country, the brilliant minds living in impossible circumstances, the teachers who care more than they're paid to, the students who study under streetlights because they believe education is their way out. We're not giving handouts, we're removing barriers, and we're trusting that when you give people a genuine chance, they don't just succeed, they transform everything around them. The crowd erupted. Not polite applause, real celebration. People who'd been invisible their whole lives were being told they mattered, that they had value, that someone with power actually saw them. But the most powerful moment came when Zainab stepped to the microphone. She looked out at the crowd, at the children sitting on the ground, at the women who'd helped her survive on these streets, at the teacher who'd let her borrow books, and she spoke with a voice that carried across the bridge. I used to think my value was determined by what I didn't have. No parents, no home, no money, no future. But then I met someone who needed what I did have: knowledge, patience, hope. And I learned that poverty isn't about lacking things. It's about lacking opportunity, lacking access, lacking people who believe in you. Chief Bakare didn't save me. He saw me. That's different. Saving me would have been feeding me, housing me, sending me to school and calling it done. Seeing me meant understanding that I had something to offer, that I wasn't just a project to fix, I was a person with gifts to share. And when you see people that way, everything changes, not just for them, for you too. She paused, looked directly at the chief. You gave me a platform. Now I'm going to use it to make sure every child in this country knows that where they sleep at night doesn't determine how far they can go. The chief felt tears in his eyes. He wasn't embarrassed. His wife was crying beside him. Amara was smiling with pride. And in that moment, surrounded by people his old self would have driven past without seeing, he felt richer than he'd ever felt in his life. The foundation grew faster than anyone expected. Within a year, they'd identified and supported 300 students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Within 2 years, they'd built 7 schools in underserved communities. Within 3 years, their graduates were winning national competitions. Zainab graduated top of her class, received admission offers from universities around the world. She chose to stay in Nigeria, chose to attend the University of Lagos and study education, because she said her country invested in her, so she was investing back. The chief's business partners who'd questioned his decision were now calling it genius. The foundation improved his company's reputation, generated positive press, made his brand synonymous with social responsibility. But the chief didn't care about any of that. He cared that his daughter had a best friend. He cared that his wife smiled more. He cared that he could drive through Lagos and see children wearing the foundation's scholarship uniform with pride. He cared that he learned what truly mattered before it was too late. His nickname changed. People stopped calling him the Fortress, started calling him the Bridge Builder. He liked that better. A fortress keeps people out. A bridge brings people together. That's what Zainab had taught him. Connection is stronger than protection. On the 5-year anniversary of the day he first saw Zainab on his security footage, the chief held a private dinner, just his family and Zainab. They sat in the garden where it all began, under the stars, near the stone bench where a homeless girl once tutored through a window. Amara was preparing for university herself now, confident, brilliant, whole. The chief raised his glass. To the girl who saved my daughter, who saved my family, who saved me from a life of having everything and meaning nothing. Zainab shook her head. Chief, you're giving me too much credit. I just shared what I knew. The chief smiled. That's exactly the point. You gave from your poverty and shamed my wealth. You had nothing and offered everything. You taught me that the most valuable currency isn't money, it's care, it's time, it's seeing people as they are and helping them become who they could be. That lesson is worth more than every building I've ever constructed. Amara added her own thought. Zainab, you gave me my voice back, not because you tried to fix me, but because you treated me like I wasn't broken, like I was just someone who needed to be heard differently. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me. Zainab's eyes glistened. You all keep thanking me, but you changed my life too. You gave me proof that kindness isn't weakness, that helping others doesn't make you a victim, that the world can be different if people are willing to see beyond what's expected. The chief sat back in his chair, watched these two young women who'd found each other across impossible divides, and he thought about all the things he used to think mattered, the deals, the properties, the status. None of it compared to this, to sitting in his garden with people who genuinely loved each other, who'd built something real through the most unlikely circumstances. His phone buzzed. A business emergency, a deal falling through. His old self would have jumped up, rushed to fix it, let it consume his evening. His new self silenced the phone. Whatever it was could wait. This moment couldn't. He'd learned that lesson well, from a homeless girl who taught him that the best investment isn't in buildings, it's in people. The best return isn't profit, it's purpose. The best legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you lift up while you're still here. They talked long into the night, about dreams and plans and the Foundation's future, about the hundreds of students whose lives were changing, about the teachers being trained, about the schools being built, about the ripple effects spreading through communities. And somewhere in that conversation, the chief realized something profound. He'd started this journey thinking he was rewarding Zainab, giving her what she deserved for helping his daughter. But the truth was different. Zainab had rewarded him, given him something he didn't know he was missing, a reason to build that went beyond ego, a purpose that extended beyond profit, a life that meant something. The Foundation's 10th anniversary became a national event. The president attended, business leaders, educators, media from across Africa. But the chief insisted the stage be filled with students, the ones who'd been given chances, who'd taken those chances and run with them. Doctors now, engineers, teachers themselves, leaders. They shared their stories, where they came from, what the Foundation meant, how one person's decision to see potential instead of poverty had changed everything. Zainab was there too, no longer the skinny girl with borrowed books, now a master's degree holder in education, author of a book on inclusive teaching methods, advisor to government education policy, and still, at her core, the same person who just wanted to help. She took the stage last, looked out at the thousands gathered, and told a story that brought the house down. 10 years ago, I was sleeping under a bridge, hungry, scared, convinced that my life would be short and hard and forgotten. I had nothing except books I couldn't keep and knowledge I couldn't use. Then I met a girl who needed help, and I helped her because that's what you do when you can. I didn't expect anything in return, didn't plan for this, didn't dream I'd be standing here. But Chief Bakare saw something in that moment. He saw that value isn't determined by circumstances. He saw that the girl with nothing had something his money couldn't buy. And instead of being threatened by that, he celebrated it. He built on it. He turned a small act of kindness into a movement. That's leadership. Not building bigger, building deeper. Not accumulating more, amplifying others. She paused, let the words land, then continued. This foundation isn't about Chief Bakare's wealth, it's about his wisdom. The wisdom to understand that the girl under the bridge and the girl in the mansion both had something to teach, both had value, both deserved to be seen. He didn't save me from poverty, he partnered with me to fight it. Big difference. One creates dependency, the other creates dignity. We need more of the second, more people willing to see past the surface, past the circumstances, past the assumptions, to the human being underneath, to the potential waiting for opportunity. That's what changes countries. Not handouts, partnership. The crowd rose to their feet. The applause lasted 5 minutes, but the chief barely heard it. He was watching Amara in the front row, his daughter, his brilliant, thriving daughter who'd found her voice because someone cared enough to listen differently. That's what all of this was about. Not buildings or programs or publicity. One connection. One girl seeing another girl. One moment of genuine care. Everything else grew from that seed. And he'd almost missed it. Almost called security that first morning. Almost stopped it before it started. The thought made him cold. How many miracles do we stop before they begin because they don't look like we expect? How many Zainabs do we turn away because they come through the wrong door? After the ceremony, a young reporter approached the chief, asked him the question he'd been asked 100 times, but never tired of answering. Chief Bakare, what would you say is your greatest achievement? Your towers? Your wealth? Your foundation? The chief smiled, led the reporter to where Zainab and Amara stood together, laughing, planning, dreaming, pointed at them. Those two young women who found each other across impossible odds, who taught me that real wealth isn't what you have, it's who you've helped become who they're meant to be. I built buildings that'll stand for decades, but I invested in people who'll impact generations. That's my greatest achievement, learning the difference before it was too late. The reporter scribbled notes, asked one more question. What advice would you give to other wealthy people, other leaders? The chief didn't hesitate. Stop looking for people who fit your world. Start seeing people who could expand it. The homeless girl has wisdom. The street child has genius. The overlooked person has gifts you need. But you'll never know if you don't look, if you don't see, if you don't value people beyond their circumstances. Zainab didn't need me to give her worth. She had it already. I just needed to recognize it. That's the shift. From savior to partner. From charity to collaboration. From helping to honoring. Make that shift, and you don't just change lives, you transform your own.
Years continued to pass. The foundation expanded internationally. Other countries adopted the model. The chief retired from his construction business, dedicated himself full-time to the work. His towers still stood across Lagos, but when people talked about Ademola Bakare, they didn't mention buildings anymore. They talked about the lives, the students, the teachers, the schools, the movement. They talked about the homeless girl and the billionaire's daughter, about the night everything changed, about the choice to see instead of overlook, about the reward that transformed everyone it touched. Zainab eventually started her own NGO, focused specifically on girls' education in rural areas. The chief was her first major donor, but more than that, her mentor, her friend, her partner in the work. They traveled together to remote villages, sat with families, listened to stories, identified potential, removed barriers. It became their shared purpose, the thing that gave both their lives meaning beyond what they'd started with. And Amara? She became a doctor, specialized in pediatrics, worked in underfunded hospitals, refused positions in private practice that would have made her wealthy, said she'd seen what really mattered. Health isn't about expensive facilities, it's about care, about seeing each child as a person, not a patient, about treating the whole human, not just the symptoms. She carried the lesson forward, the one Zainab taught and her father learned. People matter more than profit. Connection heals better than credentials. Love, expressed through action, changes everything. The chief's wife found her own role in the transformation, started a program for mothers in underserved communities, teaching financial literacy, small business skills, collective support systems. She said for years she'd been decorating mansions when she should have been building foundations, not concrete foundations, human ones. The work gave her purpose she'd been missing, connection to women she'd been separated from by wealth, understanding that privilege isn't about having more, it's about using what you have to lift others. The Bakare family became synonymous with transformation, not because they gave the most money, though they gave plenty, but because they gave themselves, their time, their attention, their genuine care. They showed up, they listened, they learned,
They adapted. They stayed humble even as their impact grew massive. Other wealthy families took notice, started asking questions. How do you do this? How do you find the right people? How do you measure success? The chief's answer was always the same. You don't find the right people. You see the people in front of you rightly. And you don't measure success in numbers. You measure it in transformation, in voices found, in potential unlocked, in lives redirected toward purpose. The metrics that matter can't be graphed. They're written on faces, heard in laughter, felt in communities that used to be hopeless and now are building. On the 20th anniversary of that first morning in the garden, the chief gathered everyone who'd been part of the journey. It wasn't a public event, just the people who mattered. Zainab and her family now, Amara and hers, teachers from the foundation, students who'd graduated years ago, market women who'd helped Zainab survive on the streets, the security guard who first spotted her on the cameras, the teacher who'd loaned her books, everyone who'd played a part in the unlikely story. They filled the garden, sat on the grass, shared food, told stories, laughed until they cried. The chief stood in the center of it all, looked around at the lives intersecting, at the rich and poor sitting together like family, at the barriers broken, the assumptions shattered, the love multiplied. And he tried to speak but couldn't because the emotion was too strong. Zainab saw his struggle, walked over, put a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to say anything, Chief. We know." He shook his head, managed to get the words out. "I just want you all to understand. 20 years ago, I had everything money could buy, but I was poor. Poor in purpose, poor in connection, poor in meaning. Then a homeless girl taught my daughter math through a window, and I had to choose, protect my fortress or build a bridge. I built the bridge, and it led me here, to all of you, to this, to a life that finally matters." Zainab smiled, tears in her eyes. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." The chief interrupted gently. "No. You gave my daughter her voice when no one else could. That makes us even." Amara joined them, wrapped her arms around both. "We're not even. We're together. That's better." The three of them stood like that. The billionaire who learned to see, the homeless girl who taught him how, the silent daughter who found her voice. 3 lives that shouldn't have intersected but did. 3 people who transformed each other in ways money never could. And around them, hundreds of others whose lives had been touched by what started in a garden 20 years ago. The chief looked up at the stars, the same stars that had been watching that first morning, when everything changed, when he chose connection over control, when he learned that the greatest reward isn't what you give someone, it's what you allow them to give you. Zainab gave him purpose. Amara gave him joy. The work gave him meaning. And all of it started because he was willing to see a homeless girl not as a problem to solve, but as a person with gifts to share. That shift in vision, that's what changed everything. Not his money, not his power, not his resources, his willingness to see differently, to value differently, to invest in people, not just projects. As the evening wound down and people started to leave, the chief found himself alone with Zainab one last time in the garden. She was quieter now, reflective. "Chief, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd done what most people would do? Called security that first morning, had me arrested, stopped me from coming back?" The chief was silent for a long moment. "Every day. I think about it every single day. How close I came to missing all of this. How instinct almost won over intuition. How I was seconds away from calling the police when I saw you reading instead of stealing. That pause saved everything." Zainab nodded slowly. "I think about it too. What would have happened to me if you'd been like everyone else? If you'd seen a threat instead of a person? I'd probably still be under that bridge, or worse." The chief shook his head firmly. "No, someone like you doesn't stay down. You would have found another way, another door, another chance. People with your gift for seeing and caring and teaching, they rise. Maybe not as fast, maybe not as far, but they rise. I just got the privilege of being part of your journey." Zainab smiled. "You're being modest. You changed my trajectory completely." He met her eyes. "And you changed mine. That's what I'm trying to tell you. This wasn't rescue, it was exchange. You had something I needed, I had something you needed. We both came out richer. That's how it should work." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the last conversations fading as guests departed. Then Zainab spoke again, softer now. "What do you want people to remember about all of this? When the story gets told, when people hear about the homeless girl and the billionaire, what's the lesson you want them to take?" The chief considered carefully. "I want them to know that worth isn't measured in bank accounts, that the person sleeping rough might have exactly what you're missing, that privilege is responsibility, not permission, that the best investment you can make is in another human's potential, that seeing people costs nothing but changes everything." He paused. "But mostly, I want them to know that it's never too late. To change, to learn, to start building what actually matters. I was 53 when I met you, 53 years of building the wrong things, but I still had time to build right. So does everyone watching, everyone listening, everyone thinking it's too late to matter. It's not. Start where you are."
Zainab stood, extended her hand. The chief looked at it, remembered the first time she'd reached out, how hesitant she'd been, how far they'd both come. He took her hand, she pulled him to his feet, and then she did something unexpected. She hugged him, really hugged him, not the polite embrace of professional colleagues, the genuine embrace of family. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for trusting me, for building all of this with me. Thank you for letting me matter." The chief's voice broke. "Thank you for teaching my daughter, for teaching me, for showing up every day with nothing but hope and making it enough. You didn't just change our lives, Zainab. You changed what I believe is possible." She pulled back, looked at him with clear eyes. "Then let's keep changing what's possible, for as long as we can, for as many people as we can. Deal?" "Deal." They walked toward the house together, the lights warm against the Lagos night. Behind them, the garden where everything started. Ahead, the foundation's offices where everything continued. Around them, a city full of people waiting to be seen, waiting for their chance, waiting for someone to look past circumstances to potential. The chief knew they couldn't reach everyone, couldn't solve everything, but they could start. Keep starting. Keep seeing, keep building bridges instead of fortresses. That's what Zainab taught him. That's what he'd spend the rest of his life honoring. One person at a time, one connection at a time, one unlikely friendship that becomes a movement. That's how the world changes, not through grand gestures, through genuine seeing, through valuing what others overlook, through rewards that transform the giver as much as the receiver. And Zainab's story became more than just a story. It became proof. Proof that homeless doesn't mean hopeless, that poor doesn't mean powerless, that circumstances don't determine destiny. Proof that when people with resources choose to see people without them as partners instead of projects, magic happens. Lives transform, communities shift, nations change. All because someone was willing to look past what made sense to what mattered. The chief learned that lesson from a girl under a bridge, and he spent 20 years making sure the world learned it too. His towers would crumble eventually, his wealth would redistribute, his name would fade from Forbes lists, but the lives he touched, the students he supported, the teachers he trained, the families he empowered, they would ripple forward generation after generation, child after child, dream after dream. That's the reward that lasts. That's the legacy that matters. Not what you build for yourself, what you build in others. And it all started with a choice, to see a homeless girl not as a security threat, but as a human with gifts, to value her knowledge over her circumstances, to partner instead of patronize, to learn instead of lecture, to receive instead of just give.
If this story touched something in you, we want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell us what moment hit you hardest. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Tell us about a time someone saw potential in you when others didn't, or a time you chose to see someone differently and it changed everything. Your stories matter. Your voice counts. And somewhere, someone needs to hear that seeing people rightly can transform everything. If you enjoyed this journey through an African story that proves love and wisdom can come from the most unexpected places, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story that reminds you what truly matters. Share this with someone who needs to remember that circumstances don't define worth, that the homeless girl might be the wisest teacher, that the best rewards transform everyone they touch. Because Chief Bakari's story isn't just his, it's ours. A reminder that we all have the power to see differently, to value what others miss, to build bridges instead of walls. So stay kind, stay awake to the people around you, stay willing to be surprised by where wisdom lives, and keep watching. Because every week we bring you stories from across Africa that prove humanity's greatest treasures aren't found in vaults, they're found in each other.